On Tuesday afternoon at 2:14 p.m., David remained seated in front of his 48 by 24-inch laminated composite desk. The digital thermostat on the eastern wall indicated an ambient indoor temperature of 74.3 degrees Fahrenheit, alongside a relative humidity level of exactly 42%. The HVAC ceiling vent produced a faint, uninterrupted airflow measured at 30 cubic feet per minute. Outside the double-pane window, pale gray stratus clouds covered approximately 70% of the visible sky. A 3-mile-per-hour westerly breeze caused the outermost branches of an oak tree to sway in a subtle, repetitive arc. No abrupt atmospheric changes or meteorological disturbances were recorded, maintaining an entirely predictable and neutral suburban afternoon environment. The objects resting across the flat desk surface were situated according to an orderly geometric layout. On the upper left quadrant, a rectangular dark gray neoprene mousepad measuring 9 by 8 inches sat parallel to the desk edge, maintaining an exact 2-inch offset. At the center of the pad, an optical mouse cast a steady crimson glow from its downward-facing LED aperture. Positioned near the center of the desk was a 12-inch clear acrylic ruler with imperial markings etched along its beveled edge. Directly below the ruler rested 3 sheets of standard letter-size scratch paper, measuring 8.5 by 11 inches. The 3 sheets were stacked with their corners aligned within a tolerance of 1 millimeter, each featuring a standard basis weight of 20 pounds. David adjusted his upper torso forward by 15 degrees and extended his right forearm toward an upright cylindrical canvas pencil case. The container measured 3 inches in diameter and 7 inches in vertical height, constructed from heavyweight beige duck canvas. A closed brass zipper track circled the upper rim, securing an open top where 4 writing implements stood upright. Inside the holder were 2 chisel-tip yellow highlighters, a 0.5 millimeter mechanical drafting pencil, and his primary writing tool, a standard retractable blue fine-point ballpoint pen. David pinched the pen's plastic pocket clip between his thumb and forefinger, lifting it vertically along a straight 6-inch trajectory. The pen weighed approximately 0.34 ounces and measured 5.63 inches. Looking through the transparent polycarbonate barrel, David observed the internal polypropylene ink tube. The high-viscosity, oil-based blue pigment had receded down to the final millimeter above the brass connector crimp. The remaining transparent follower grease sat stagnant within the upper column, confirming that the reservoir was virtually exhausted after months of routine documentation. David lowered the tungsten carbide ball tip onto the upper margin of the scratch paper at a standard 55-degree writing angle. Applying 4 ounces of downward pressure, he began writing the entry "Afternoon Meeting Prep." Halfway through the curved stroke of the first capital letter, the ink deposition abruptly stopped. The tip produced only a dry, colorless indentation across the wood fibers. It was 2:15 p.m. David ceased lateral hand movement and rotated the pen horizontally to inspect the dry contact area under the overhead light. 4 successive orbital scribbles within a 1/4-inch test square failed to stimulate pigment transfer. The internal mechanical supply was officially depleted. David rested the pen flat on the mouse pad and prepared to initiate the component disassembly procedure. Using the thumb and index finger of his left hand, David immobilized the lower ridged silicone grip section. With his right hand, he grasped the upper transparent barrel and applied counterclockwise torque. The molded internal threads engaged and rotated against each other with a soft, dry friction. After 3.5 complete revolutions, the threading cleared its final pitch. The pen separated cleanly into 4 discrete parts: the 3.3-inch upper barrel containing the internal ratchet plunger, the lower tapered grip section, the spent 4.4-inch ink cartridge, and a miniature stainless steel compression spring. David extracted the empty cartridge and placed it aside, while seating the tiny spring 10 inches inward from the desk edge to prevent premature displacement. To secure an identical replacement, David shifted his weight slightly and pulled open the middle drawer of his 3-drawer pedestal cabinet. The brushed aluminum handle moved smoothly as the dual steel ball-bearing slides traveled 10 inches along their tracks with a muted mechanical hum. The drawer interior was organized with a 6-compartment translucent polypropylene tray. The layout of the tray followed a strict categorical division. The first compartment contained 2 white vinyl erasers and 12 standard silver-plated paper clips. The adjacent slot housed 4 ultrafine gel pen refills. The third partition contained replacement cartridges for oil-based ballpoint pens, arranged neatly in their original vacuum-sealed manufacturer blister packaging. Bypassing 3 medium-point black refills, David located the designated package for a fine-point blue refill. The front of the package consisted of a 1.5-inch clear thermoformed plastic bubble bonded to a silver foil laminated cardboard backing. The printed typography displayed the model reference BKL5C, denoting a fine line width, and blue archival oil-based pigment. The reverse side of the packaging listed standard manufacturer notices in 6-point sans serif type, including storage temperature limits between 32 and 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Satisfied with the specification match, David gently pushed the drawer closed until the hydraulic damper caught the front panel, sealing it flush against the cabinet frame with a soft, muffled latch sound. Holding the blister pack with both hands, David located the 0.1-inch V-shaped starter notch cut into the upper right corner. Applying a measured shearing force with his index fingers, he tore the laminate backing downward along a straight diagonal line. The foil tore with a crisp, low-pitched crackle, exposing the upper cylindrical stem of the brand-new refill cartridge. David slid the new plastic cartridge completely out of its foil enclosure. The steel collar was capped with a 0.05-inch protective sphere of red synthetic wax, designed to inhibit volatile solvent evaporation during transit. Placing the edge of his right thumbnail against the wax boundary, he flicked the bead upward, cleanly dislodging it to reveal the factory-fresh metal point. With the fresh refill held in his left hand, David reached his right arm across the desk surface to retrieve the lower grip casing and the weighting compression spring. As his forearm traversed the tabletop at an elevation of roughly 1 inch, the stiff cuff of his long-sleeved woven cotton shirt traced an unexpected horizontal path directly over the loose metal component. The rigid edge of the cuff's polyester button made brief kinetic contact with the perimeter of the compression spring. The impact imparted rotational energy to the 0.71-inch cylinder, sending it sliding across the laminate surface toward the desk boundary. Before David could arrest the motion, the spring rolled over the beveled right edge and entered a state of free fall. The lightweight stainless steel spring dropped 29 inches through the ambient air, striking the high-density PVC floor mat below with a faint metallic tap. The mat absorbed a portion of the kinetic force, but the spring's natural elasticity converted the downward momentum into a horizontal skip, propelling it 14 inches beneath the desk toward the chair base. David froze his hands in place, remaining motionless for 2 seconds to listen for any tertiary deflection. The room returned to its standard baseline silence, broken only by the continuous 1,200 RPM rotation of the computer chassis cooling fan. David exhaled slowly through his nose and bent his torso downward to initiate a preliminary visual scan of the floor surface. The ceiling-mounted dual 40-watt fluorescent fixtures emitted diffuse illumination, creating mild glare across the textured surface of the protective floor mat. The lost spring possessed an outer diameter of only 0.12 inches and a wire thickness of 0.014 inches, rendering it visually indistinct among the geometric textures and subtle shadows beneath the workstation. David evaluated the operational stakes of the missing part. Without the counter-directional force supplied by the compression spring, the internal ratchet push-button mechanism would fail to lock the pen point in an extended writing position. The new ink cartridge would remain completely unusable inside an untensioned housing, halting all pending handwritten documentation. 4. David carefully placed the new refill on the center of the desk pad to prevent a second dropped component. Lowering himself onto his right knee, he retrieved his smartphone from his front pocket, tapped the display, and activated the integrated rear LED flashlight. The emitter produced a concentrated beam of cool white light rated at approximately 5,500 Kelvin. To optimize the search physics, David lowered the light source to an elevation of 2 inches above the floor mat, projecting the beam almost parallel to the flat surface. This shallow 10-degree angle maximized the length of cast shadows, transforming any raised three-dimensional obstacle into a high-contrast visual marker against the uniform gray flooring material. David divided the search area beneath the desk into 4 equal quadrants, methodically panning the beam in 15-degree sweeping arcs from left to right. In the first quadrant, the grazing light revealed only 2 stray strands of synthetic fiber and a microscopic crumb of white eraser residue, both of which were cataloged and visually dismissed from the target objective. At 1 minute and 20 seconds into the search sweep, David directed the illumination toward the intersection between the right front nylon caster wheel of his office chair and the powder-coated steel desk leg. A crisp, elongated shadow with a repeating helical serration appeared along the floor, cast by a small metallic cylinder propped at a 45-degree angle. David adjusted the beam angle by 5 degrees, confirming the bright specular reflection of natural stainless steel wire. The compression spring had come to rest against the inner weld seam of the tubular desk frame. It remained entirely intact, free from entanglement with floor debris, and resting within immediate manual reach without requiring furniture relocation. Extending his right hand with steady deceleration, David contacted the outer coil of the spring using the clean pads of his thumb and index finger. He lifted the component vertically, bringing it up to eye level under the illumination. He delivered 2 short, controlled puffs of air across the coil gaps to dislodge any microscopic lint settled upon the wire surface. Holding the spring between both thumbs, David applied an axial compressive force of approximately 3 ounces, cycling the coil through 3 complete compression and rebound strokes. The spring returned instantaneously to its baseline uncompressed length of 0.71 inches with 0 permanent structural deformation, confirming full mechanical integrity. David stood up from the floor, returned his smartphone to his pocket, and sat back into the ergonomic chair, adjusting his posture back to vertical alignment. The digital wall clock advanced past 2:18 p.m., while the ambient room temperature held steady at 74.3 degrees Fahrenheit. He arrayed all functional components across the center of his mousepad for the final reassembly sequence. For the initial assembly step, David held the replacement blue refill upright in his left hand and slid the silver compression spring over the forward stainless steel tip. The inner diameter of the coil matched the outer diameter of the tip step precisely, allowing the spring to slide downward until it seated flush against the widened plastic shoulder of the cartridge. Next, David aligned the spring-loaded cartridge with the central bore of the lower grip casing, inserting the tip assembly until the tungsten point protruded 2 millimeters through the opening of the brass nose cone. The spring resisted with a baseline preload, maintaining steady axial alignment without lateral deviation inside the cylindrical guide channel. David then lowered the transparent polycarbonate upper barrel over the rear stem of the cartridge, aligning the molded male threads with the female receiver of the lower grip. Rotating the barrel clockwise, he engaged the threading through 3 smooth initial turns, followed by a final quarter turn that compressed the internal rubber washer with firm mechanical resistance. The 2 outer casing halves met with a flush hairline seam measuring less than 0.005 inches in clearance. David raised the assembled pen and pressed the rear knock button with his right thumb. The internal helical cam rotated smoothly against the ratchet tracks, producing an audible, high-frequency click as the blue fine point tip locked firmly into its extended position. David drew the scratch paper directly into his primary field of view, positioning the newly seated 0.5 millimeter ball tip against the interrupted arc of his previous notation. He resumed the clockwise curve. Fresh, highly saturated blue oil-based ink flowed instantly onto the paper surface, bonding cleanly with the paper grain without feathering, blotting, or mechanical drag. With a steady, practiced hand motion, David completed the header, afternoon meeting prep, and proceeded to write the subsequent line item, review quarterly data sheets, and finalize distribution schedule. The line maintained a uniform 0.5 millimeters width across all 12 words, confirming that the new ball bearing was rotating freely within its steel socket. Upon completing the final period, David pressed the upper knock button once more. The internal latch disengaged with a muted snap, and the compression spring retracted the ink tip safely back inside the protective chamber of the nose cone. David placed the pen into the 3rd slot of his canvas pencil case, aligned his notepad, and rested his back against the chair. It was 2:19 p.m.